Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Jessica Pettitt, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results, which is the podcast. We are recording this in a way so that I can broadcast it next month as a podcast. And I'd like to tell everybody that we have a little bit about Jessica, the official bio. Thank you very much for sending something that was manageable and not pages and pages and pages, because there are people whose bios goes on for pages and pages, but yours, the best part is to experience you. Jessica Pettitt, who is a Master's of Education in a certified professional speaker, CSP, MED CSP, pulls together her stand-up comedy years with over 15 years of diversity trainings in a wide range of organizations to serve groups to move from abstract fears to actionable habits that lead teams to want to work together. With a sense of belonging and understanding, colleagues take more risks with their ideation, conserve precious resources through collaboration, and maintain real connections with clients over time. So, Jessica Pettitt, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride Month, yes. And I'd like to start with the question I ask everybody, which is, if you were to have a dream interview, if you were to be interviewing somebody who's not with us anymore, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who ought to be in the audience?
So just to clarify, because I prepped for, I think, a different question. So I'm interviewing them or they're interviewing me?
You're interviewing them. Basically, who from history would you like to ask questions? Who would you like to be able to talk to and say, why did you do this?
So the very first person that I thought of was W.B.E. Du Bois. So when I was in middle school, I stumbled across a book, and full disclosure, it is the only book I have ever stolen from a library. I did eventually buy that library another copy of the book, but I stole it and I still have it. But I stumbled into W.B. Du Bois' book called Souls of Black Folk. And
for our international listeners, can you explain who he was?
That's coming.
Okay.
So W.B. Du Bois was an internationally well-known activist, politician, academic, coming primarily out of the United States. His most popular book is Souls of Black Folk, which is the book that I stole from the library. And the concepts that were in the book, and this is probably, now I'm going to screw up my dates, but I'm going to say lifespan, late 1800s to early 1900s. I should Google that and make sure that I'm getting that right, because I've only had 2 cups of coffee. But the pieces that were important was that, 1852, Frederick Douglass is questioning July 4th as the United States Independence Day, which is really questionable considering all women, regardless of race, and all people who don't identify as white were not considered equal. What exactly is freedom and independence about? So a lot of times we put pressure on the Civil War is when this was determined. And the reality is that specifically African-American or Black scholars were pushing back on the systems of white supremacy long before the Civil War even started. And W.B. Du Bois was one of the first PhDs who came out of Harvard, I believe, and was able to blend law and philosophy and politics together to really challenge the fundamentals of the United States as a country as to how it was actually going to take responsibility for proclaiming freedom and independence without actually leading to freedom and independence, but also laying the groundwork in conjunction with Booker T. Washington and Marcus Garvey, the rise of a sense of pride and nationalism. And so in light of our Pride Month, right, and I say our as LGBTQ members, we're not the first subordinated or marginalized identity on the planet to experience pride or experience the need to proclaim a sense of pride against being subordinated or marginalized. And so if I got to interview or engage in a conversation, and I probably took the question too literally, but to be able to have a conversation with someone who has been doing that for decades prior to what now we look back on as the beginning of the conversation, to now have the conversation hundreds of years later about really where are we, what are we stand for, what is pride, what is freedom, what is independence, and what work do we still need to be doing? And also what is fundamental BS that keeps those structures of oppression in place so that you get your month to be prideful.
That's wonderful. And really, this is an interview show, so dream interview sounded like a good thing to say, but it can be really, who would you like to talk to? So, I'm always curious because it gives one an insight into people, and it's not a question that most people have asked over and over, had been answered over and over again. So that's why I like to get it, because people are always saying, "Oh, interesting question," and then you learn something about who they are that's not their resume. So,
and I just Googled 1868 to 1963 was his lifespan.
Thank you. So he was born actually just in the aftermath of the Civil War.
Yes.
So yeah, the 1963. He very much a force in my parents' lives. I mean, they heard him read his things while he was still alive, and we learned about him in high school too. You work you are a diversity trainer. You started as a comedian. How do you talk about serious topics? So how do you meld being a stand-up comedian and talking about serious things?
Yeah, I would actually flip it. I think I started talking about serious things and then eventually found stand-up comedy as an outlet for the irony and humor that comes from talking about difficult things. So I think people often are like, how do you put those two together? But it's harder for me to fuse my seriousness into humor than it is for my humor to then be fused into seriousness. I think that I luckily come from a very long line of storytelling family members. We're all Texans, and humor and music and things like this were very important to the storytelling and lore, lots of folklore. So that's kind of an important tool that I've always had, but recognizing disparity, the terminology of like fighting for the underdog, while also really taking responsibility for definitely rarely being considered the underdog in a scenario, was really important to me. And I find that humor
rarely being an underdog because
I'm a U.S. citizen. I was raised by people with lots of education. I've never had any economic insecurity, maybe until COVID. The amount of privileges that I have experienced in my life rarely get me into a setting where I feel like I'm the underdog or subordinated or marginalized, largely, interestingly, until I came out. So when I came out, all of a sudden, I had a subordinated or marginalized identity. And again, I'm fortunate that I had, of the family members that were left by the time I came out late, I was 27. And I didn't experience rejection from my family or anything like that. And it wasn't actually until I was rejected from the lesbian community because I married a trans man. And then my brother and his extended in-laws were really the first time that I experienced any sense of rejection. And I was well into my 30s by then. So I rarely have been considered an underdog. And so from that place, you can make jokes.
And you and I are both white, which means that we can walk down the street without fear of being oppressed for the color of our skin.
Sure. I would claim that sometimes white people will say, like, well, I've done international travel, so I know what it feels like. But the reality there is that even as a white person in a place full or majority people who do not look white, I still feel entitled to being safe and secure. So absolutely, that's very true.
I will say that there are plenty of things that we learn as women to protect ourselves, but it's not the same. And the dangers are different. The dangers are usually not guns. That's the thing. Which actually leads me to my next question. Being white and American and raised with a lot of education, there are dangers if you go down a dark alley. But the dangers don't come in police cars or people trying to shoot you because of the color of your skin. And we are recording this in June of 2020 when America is going through a great upheaval to hopefully begin to deal with the injustices suffered by the African American community. So my question for you is, as a diversity trainer, they're going to reach out and they're going to hire a lesbian. Do people expect you to just talk about LGBT, lesbian, gay issues, or do you talk about all sorts of diversity? I don't think I said that very well, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, so both is the short answer. So because I identify as an LGBT person, people generally assume that's all I talk about. And the work that I do is largely about doing work from your dominant places, or my privileged identity. So I would rather talk about whiteness, I'd rather talk about upperclassness, what it means to be a U.S. citizen, et cetera, and doing work around race, sexism, ageism, ableism, xenophobia, et cetera. Because doing the work from your dominant places is something I want to role model for other people because it costs less. So even if we use the kind of the metaphor that you were using about police brutality, when you have a privileged identity, to use the kind of metaphorical dark alley means that you have to be in this kind of very strange circumstance to possibly also experience brutality or violence versus sleeping in your own bed, showing up at work. Something that we might consider kind of mundane is much more likely to not include any kind of brutality or violence because that's part of being privileged, right? Certainly, if you, to use your example related to skin color, I should be able to do any number of things, including illegal activities where I am not going to actually be expected to be killed. So people expect me to only train from subordinated and marginalized places. Similarly, for Black speakers, they are often assumed they only speak about diversity and inclusion because they are Black. When in reality, they can speak on leadership and time management and all kinds of different things, but that's typically how we burden folks with subordinated and marginalized identities and make them do the education. And so I'm trying to do the inverse. But to your question directly, I have people who look at my website and they're like, oh, that's very gay. No, I just have short hair, right? Like there's nothing on it, like rainbow colors or not. But then there's other times where people will be like, wait, you can also speak on gay things? Oh, that's amazing. But it's the same website. So it just depends on their perceptions.
It's actually a big theme in these Facebook Lives and in this podcast is being aware of how people perceive you. And then what do you do about it? How do you take that into account when you're trying to get through to them? So as a presentation skills trainer, a whole lot of what I do is talk about who you're trying to reach and where are they coming from, metaphorically? Where are they? What assumptions are they going to make about you, whether you are female or of a person of color or whatever? What assumptions are they going to make about you? And how do you then get past that, either work with that or get past that so that they can actually hear what you have to say? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, it's largely out of your control to be successful there, but being thoughtful about it is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a big part. So what do you tell people when they say, where could we start if we're trying to be more open to
Sure.
others, to being more open, more aware of what we're perceiving about others and how that's influencing our thinking?
So I would use the exact metaphor that you just used, or the example you used as a metaphor. So the first step is, how are you excluding people? That's the first step to figuring out who to include or how to be more inclusive, right? Like there's kind of a spectrum. And most people are like, oh, we don't exclude anyone. No, everyone's welcome. Well, that's not true. There's not enough chairs for everyone to be. The room is not big enough, assuming we could convene. Or the meeting or the podcasts are only really for subscribers or people who are using Facebook. Those are the only people who can watch this Facebook Live, is if they're have a Facebook account, have the internet, and happen to be looking at it right now. They can watch the recording later, whatever. So who are you intentionally excluding helps you narrow down who you're intentionally including. So we tend to go to, let's be more inclusive, right? So like I work with organizations all the time where their strategic plans are to increase diversity by 10%. Okay, great. What is diversity now? Oh, we have no idea. Oh, okay. How are you defining diversity now? We don't know. Okay. When you increase it by 10%, by when? Oh, we don't know. Okay. How are you going to do that? Oh, we don't know. Oh, okay, good. So basically you typed a sentence, right? And one of the most important things I think that are important, whether it's Pride Month or not, is when you're learning about something, people are getting hurt, killed, suffering during your learning curve. So where you have the luxury and convenience of learning this new bauble that you're interested in, even if you're deeply passionate about the new bauble that you're interested in, while you are learning about it, someone else is dying. And so when you say increase diversity by 10%, that sounds great. Meanwhile, people feel excluded, you're not doing it, you're not taking it seriously, you're not making good definitions. COVID is an excellent example of this. And what I mean by this, and I've been told all my clients this, and they're like, oh, we're not prepared for this conversation. Okay, good. Now we can do real work. Yeah. But when things go to committee to die, it's because you are not anticipating an actual action or change coming out of that committee. When we all had to very quickly pivot because of shelter in place and social distancing and COVID-19, that went to a committee and it came out with results very quickly based on the information that was provided right then. We didn't say, you know what we should do? We should survey a historical review of global pandemics. We should do a report. Maybe we should watch a documentary, right? Maybe we should do focus groups. No, we didn't have time. So what we did is like, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's try this. And that's what I mean by moving from like fears to actionable ideation, is that we can reward failure. We're capable of rewarding failure because we're trying out new things. But we live with, specifically around diversity, we live in this kind of culture where this like nicely developed palm frond report is going to be delivered 7 years after one incident that doesn't take anything into consideration that's happened over the last 7 years, and we call it done. Well, that's not actual change. That's not growth. But when we have a global pandemic coming and you're going to have to figure out how to work and get things done without any of the things that you are normally used to, you very quickly were able, all of us were very quickly, very able to try to do something and see if it worked. And that happened almost overnight. We are capable of trying to do new things. It's just whether or not we want to.
So how could we take steps to be more open, to be more, you talk about cultural humility. Can you talk about, define that for us?
Sure. So steps to being open is to recognize you're not. Step one. And to recognize that you're not, what usually happens is we get very defensive and we start rattling off our cultural competencies and our resumes and our historical activism. And I'm a good person because. Cultural competency is super important. Great. Sure. Makes you feel safe and prepared. In order for cultural humility to show up, you have to actually acknowledge the cultural competency and the security you feel because of your resume, and set it to the side and engage in an actual conversation with what is actually happening with the actual person who is directly in front of you. It takes a lot of courage and bravery to like call someone out or call someone in or explain something that has happened and that the impact on them. And it takes no courage and no bravery to say, I have not experienced that problem, you are wrong. But it takes a lot of bravery and courage or cultural humility to say, I don't know this. I need to do my own homework, or can you tell me more? And to not get defensive. So a lot of times when people are like, how do I be more open? I don't want to offend anyone. Well, the first step is to recognize you're offending a lot of people. You don't know about it, but you're responsible for it even though you don't know about it. So occasionally you're gifted with the opportunity to know about it. And when that happens, your job is to learn from it, not to get defensive. And you can't get defensive if you enter an interaction of like, this could go very wrong. But if you, as an interview, if you ask questions you don't know the answers to, then it becomes a lot more interesting. But we don't engage with many people in a way that we don't already know the answers to, because we need to feel safe and prepared.
That's a very good point. Yeah, very interesting point. Let me ask you, talking about the serious things, when you bring humor into it, why is it, I mean, this is a podcast about presentation skills. This is a strategic speaking for results. Where and why and how intentionally do you use humor when you're talking about this?
Always.
Okay. Is it just automatic by now, or is it something that you plan?
I think humor is way more planful than people give it credit for. And I don't think there is a topic where humor is not appropriate.
Okay. Okay.
For the record, I may not be the container that can use that humor, but somebody can. So then what I have to practice or plan for is, can I point out this sense of humor out of this container, which goes back to your presentation skills, is that what people are expecting from me, the tension between acknowledging that and not acknowledging that is stand-up. That is what humor is. But is it appropriate, or is it a risk that needs to be taken? Do I feel safe and prepared for it? And can my audience feel safe and prepared if I were to use humor in this moment? That's the part that has to be planful.
Well, I certainly know that for my 30 plus years in theater, in professional theater, not to mention all the years I did it as an amateur, humor, learning how to be funny and practicing making people laugh takes way more rehearsal than most people think. And I have speakers who come to me and they say, yes, but I don't know. There's Jessica Pettitt. She's automatically funny. She must have been born that way. How could I ever learn that? And my feeling is it is a learnable skill. Some people learn it early. Some people learn it as kids. Some people learn it later. But adding humor makes people remember what you're trying to say more, I think. Is it okay to, to joke about something serious? That's what I'm asking about. You make a point of you're known for making jokes about serious subjects. How do you fit that in? How do you plan it? This is one speaker asking another now.
Sure. So there's kind of two answers, and I don't know which one you want to look for. So I'm going to try and smush them together. So first off, I think much like being more open, is not a learned skill. It's unlearning being closed is the learning of how to be open. And I think same thing, it parallels with humor. I think that we have to unlearn that we are not funny. That you pick up on irony, you pick up on moments, we're much more likely to instantly invalidate them as something that has any worth or power or meaning to anybody else. That's what you have to unlearn. So crafting a sentence or something, or to help learning, so whether we're talking about a short talk or a sentence or a like marketing advertising tagline, there's a science to it, right? So like I have a rubric that I basically merged from working with George Carlin and having a master's degree in education. So the premise being for education is you have to make a point. You have to have them practice that point, which usually as speakers, that practice is how big of a time do I have? I'll just tell a bunch of stories that are practicing the point. Sometimes we're not even clear about articulating the point. We just really fill up time with a bunch of practice. And then the application is not necessarily at the end the call to action, but for each point, what does this actually mean for someone else? How are they applying it to their life? How does my weird story, how does it apply to them? So when you get audience feedback that's like, what was your point? I mean, I had a great time, but what was the point? Then you had too much practice, not enough point. When you get someone who's like, yeah, but that's just weird stuff that happened to you, then you're not doing enough application, right? So I can do a TED Talk in under a minute, and I think anybody who's doing a keynote, it's your responsibility to have a super size, regular size, and a kid's meal version of that story, because the planner at some point in time is going to ask you to stretch. Or when you do stand-up, right? I used to MC a show every week in New York, and there was a green light to go, red light is you have a minute left, and there was a purple light. When that purple light went on, the place I was doing the stand-up shows around the corner from David Letterman's show, that purple light went on, that meant someone famous had shown up and need to practice, which means they don't care what you're saying. Shut up and get off the stage. Purple meant off, right? So when that happens, your story, if you're like, well, I really need to like complete my whole story, you're cutting into like getting to see Chris Rock riff something for the very first time. Shut up and get off the stage. And then what an honor it is to then follow Chris Rock as an MC, right? Like that's cultural humility. No, I'm in the middle of a story. Hold on, Robin. You'll get to be up here in a second. Nobody wants to hear from you now, right? So being able to flex small, medium, and large means that you understand what your point, the practice, and the application is. When we start talking about details or big concepts and ideas or lots of like verbs and actions, right? So like the basic joke premise of three unrelated things walk into a very specific kind of bar, right? Like that is not how you tell the joke, but that is the fundamental platform for the joke, right? Three unrelated things. What are they doing together, right? Well, those are very specific and they're walking into the bar or whatever, drove a cab into a bar. So the very specific things and the bar isn't congruent, which connects to the idea of like, what is going on here? So just that premise allows, no matter what you say, it's going to be funny.
I love
because
it.
you hit all of them and you're moving across what the point is, right? So then one of my favorite jokes about things that you're not supposed to joke about is, what is the biggest lesson from 9/11?
What?
You said you would never forget. The reason why that's funny is the theme after 9/11 was never forget. And we have all forgotten.
Yeah.
So I can tell that joke when I'm also using it as an entry point to, we lose our commitments all the time. We are distracted all the time. George Floyd was not the first nor the last, and even since his death, Memorial Day has not been the last death.
Yes.
Right? And the reality is that people are forgetting, and not everybody, but some people didn't notice in the first place. They're just going about their regular daily lives. And some people going about their regular daily lives is falling asleep in a Wendy's parking lot. Right? Yeah. Like this is where
that was the gentleman in Atlanta who was
Rayshard, yes.
Rayshard Brooks, yes. This
Right.
is for my international audience, doesn't always know all the names. So
yeah, sure. And I mean,
and people might be
yes,
listening to this a year from now. I hope they're listening to this a year from now. Yes.
Most US people have lost track of the names because there's so many of them, which is why the mantra say their name, say their name, say their name is so important, because it's the same mantra and it's just new names all the time, which is calling to question the patterns of police brutality. So then now let's talk about police brutality. That is a very difficult topic that makes people super nervous, right? So what ends up happening is privileged folks hear violence and brutality. Oh, okay. So then they take the topic and they move it to the same topic but a different center. So then they start talking about violence and brutality, which somehow becomes about looting and rioting. So they think they're talking about the same topic, but they're talking about this topic in a way they're more comfortable because of the power dynamics. And I can use humor to point out that, like, ketchup and tomato paste are very different things, and you're usually more familiar with one of them. Can we stay on topic? You don't use ketchup when it requests tomato paste. But you also don't use tomato paste when it requests ketchup, right? Even though technically they're both made from tomatoes. You've moved to where you're comfortable. This is not about your comfort. This is about us learning about what are we going to do, because discomfort is a lot better place to be than actually lynched, murdered in public, and probably not even held legally accountable for it. Do you see that?
Yeah.
That's where humor comes in. So
I'm curious about your book, which is Good Enough Now. Part of me, when I first looked at it, I said, that's good enough now. And, it's interesting how the way you say something changes the meaning of it. How does being good and enough and now apply to where we are in June of 2020 on Pride Week, the end of Pride Month?
Sure. Well, let's use Pride Month as an example, right? So West Coast, East Coast has a fight of who started Pride Month. So was it the Compton cafeteria riots in San Francisco, or was it the Stonewall riots that were in New York City? Fun story. People live in between those two cities, but San Francisco and New York tend to dictate the LGBT agenda. So now there's a fight. So we also have whitewashed the start of Pride, whichever one you pick, is because both riots were not majority white people, were not majority upper class, educated, employed white people who identified as gay or lesbian. Nope, that's not who was there. And usually it's because anti-system kind of demonstrations are usually done at the hands of subordinated, marginalized people, and then usurped, misappropriated up to more educated, upper class white people who are related to those groups. Same thing could be happening with the Black Lives Matter movement. They've done a very good job of like, no, not today. They come like, but it also involves all of us. So misappropriation is wrong, but involving everyone is really important. When you are moving from a movement that we have forgotten the history, we've changed the story of the history, we've added capitalism and high-end sponsors who seem to only care about LGBT stuff in the month of June. So now we've commodified Pride.
And they're really aiming for LGBT people who are going to buy LGBT labeled branded products. So
sure, because it's disposable income. But if we're actually really looking at disposable income, we're only looking at the upper class white gay and lesbian people, because bisexual and trans identified folks, even if they identify as white, are usually under or unemployed, so they have less expendable income. Yes. So we're splintering the community. Then there's splinters of different prides, right? And then I live in a small town, so our Pride is in October because that's when the university is open, so there's just more people in town. Except now the university is probably not going to open in person, so who knows when Pride's going to be, but ours isn't canceled, right? So the reality is that, and I think I'm forgetting your original question, but
where does good enough now, being good enough now, fit into all of this?
Okay, appreciate it. So
I want to make sure that we're not that we don't take too much. I want to respect your time. So I want to get to Good Enough Now and this wonderful book that you've written.
Yeah. So I appreciate the nudge. So the reason why I started talking about pride is because even though it's not a perfect starting place, a perfect foundation, what ends up happening is this kind of exceptionalism thing. So if it can't be perfect, then we can't do it. But if we live in a culture that's based on perfectionism, then we're often not going to try and do a lot of things.
Yeah.
So back to rewarding failure, the idea of trying to try may not actually lead to actually trying, but you're trying to try, which is at least the right activity. Mm-hmm. So it rewards the beginnings instead of only rewarding successful solutions. By virtue of being good, I believe you are providing grace for yourself and grace for most other people, and maybe grace for most parts of yourself. I believe we are good. I believe our life has taught us how to show up prepared and safe. And when you see somebody that you are questioning whether or not they are good, imagine what has happened in their life, that their life has taught them that this is how to show up. Yeah. That's the space of grace. Enough is that you do not need more classes or more credentials or a more diverse friend base or a bigger cable package, or we have all these reasons that we could be better or the best, and we're not those things, so we're out, right? But the reality is that how you are right now doesn't need to be judged against something else, and how you are right now is the best tool you have right now. So why don't you just work with the hot mess that you are? That's enough. Mm-hmm. And then the idea of now is that we wait for like this perfect moment. You know, like one of the great tragedies when my father died is long story, very short. My dad did not handle the death of my mother very well and took it out on my brother. He eventually got a therapist. He eventually planned this very dramatic apology to my brother. And it was going to happen over Thanksgiving. And according to his journals, he had like created this very romantic apology thing that was going to happen with him and his son. Dun, 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 dun. And my father died November 11th.
Oh.
So these like perfectly laid plans never occurred.
Yeah.
So I tried to explain this to my brother, and it doesn't count. Mm-hmm. Right? So he could have also just said, I'm really sorry. Mm-hmm. No fanfare, no gorgeousness, no dry cleaning required. But he didn't. And so the now is, what are you going to do in this exact moment with the resources you currently have with this set of hot mess variables? Get to work, right? So the tagline, doing the best you can with what you got some of the time, is better than nothing never.
That's excellent. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Jessica Pettitt, I think this is a good line to end on. Say that tagline again. I want to remember that.
Doing the best you can with what you got. Some of the time. I forgot my own tagline. Doing the best you can with what you got some of the time is better than nothing never.
That's wonderful. It's been such an honor to have you on my show and on the podcast. I'm delighted to have you. How can we find out more about you?
So you can always go to goodenoughnow.book.com or /club. I have a new book club. Goodenoughnow.book.com to order. The second edition's about to come up. You can order /club and go to be part of the book club. Jess Pettitt is also a website that works, and I'm happy to help. And the last thing I would say, because I feel that you're wrapping, is pride is not canceled. Pride is a way of living your life. And what are we doing to allow people space to have their own sense of pride all the months, not just when the calendar says so?
I love that. Yes, indeed. Pride is not canceled. Some of the parties might be canceled, but we are still proud of being who we are. Thank you so much, Jessica Pettitt. This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I want to remind you, if you liked this, please share it with your friends. Please check out my podcast at elizabethbachman.com/podcast and share it. Tell people about us. We're happy to have you with us.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.